looking for super intelligence, I'd be satisfied with anyone who's smart out there. You're watching TechStrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Friday. Wow, Friday. I just felt like we were talking about AI on Monday. You know, and then maybe it was Tuesday or Wednesday, artificial general intelligence, AGI. Today is super intelligence. Are we all dumb? I don't know, but we've got a lot to talk about here at TechStrong Gang. We've got great people to talk about. We've got a whole Seattle crew going on today. He's always in Seattle, usually, unless he's traveling. Our friend Fred Wilmot. Joining him in Seattle, though, and he is traveling, is Ira Winkler. Staying on the West Coast, man in Silicon Valley, John Swartz. And still up, I don't know if you're in Lake Placid still, but the Dean, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Still am, and boy, it's hot and sweltering in Lake Placid, but there's no
as it is in Seattle. As it is in Seattle, we hear. Not as hot as it is in Dubai, probably, but anyway, that was the green room discussion. Let's jump into our real discussions for today. We're going to start off, you know, AWS had a bit of a shindig this week, and they made a whole bunch of announcements, as you would imagine, around AI agents, Q, Bedrock, all the AWS buzzwords, as well as opening up registrations for reInvent in December. But Mike, what's the deal with AI agent builders? It looks like AWS wants to be king of the hill.
Yeah, oddly enough, AWS and all those folks in Seattle descended upon New York this past week and launched a thing called Amazon Bedrock Agent Core Services. And it's basically the frameworks that you need to go build and deploy AI agents at scale. And they're pointing out that all these things right now are missing for all our chit-chats about AI agents taking over the world. They're like saying, you can't really do that unless you have things for securing their identities and giving them gateways to access APIs and then the tools for building and deploying them. And admittedly, this is a preview of something that they're rolling out, so they're a little bit early. But one of the things that seems to be coming through loud and clear is that enterprises are now looking at all this stuff and starting to put the pieces together. And it's not sure, to my way of thinking, but maybe more of them are going to rely on the cloud than ever because they don't have these capabilities in an on-premise environment. At least that's what AWS is betting on. And it was interesting because they had the head of development for Intuit was there talking about how they built a whole operating system for AI agents on top of the AWS service. You know, this will warm your heart, but the head of platform engineering enablement for Reuters was there also talking about what they're up to and their plans for building out AI agents. And it's still early days as far as the enterprise is concerned, but it looks like I'm betting that AWS, all these services will be copied by every other cloud service provider shortly. So, Alan, it looks like we're in a race for AI agent infrastructure.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of A's in that AI agent infrastructure thing. But look, this is not a new story, though. You know, for me, the agentic AI thing first kind of burst on the scene with Benioff and Salesforce, Agentforce, and building thousands and tens of thousands of agents. And ever since that day, every vendor under the sun has said, we want to be your agent man. I want to be your backdoor agent man. And why wouldn't AWS want to be that too? My issue here, though, is I'm sure they'll build great agents, but Bedrock is a fantastic platform.
Yeah, but let me... Oh, sorry, Alan.
One second. Let me just put the cherry on. The problem is the world is moving away from single cloud platforms to multi-cloud. Everybody wants to put, you know, a little piece here, a little piece there. They don't want to be locked in any one platform. Do the AWS agents work outside of AWS? Ira, go ahead.
Well, that was actually kind of the point I was going to bring up, because really, I hate the whole broad term AI, if you haven't known that before. Mm-hmm. And because AI is really just mathematical library programs, it's algorithms. And so what AWS is essentially doing is they're putting together and packaging and making it easier to implement the algorithms when you're using it within AWS. But just because you have these algorithms in place and something easier to make them possible, the problem is you need the data to put into it, because you have to train the AI. The AI has to be able to make good decisions. In order to make good decisions, it has to be able to have access to the appropriate data and so on. And having the program itself is one thing, but having all the data being able to pull into it is another thing. And to your point, Alan, if it's sitting there looking at, if all your data is on AWS in buckets that are accessible to the agent, maybe you have access to the data, but it still has to be in the right formats and stuff. And that's one of the problems. However, but if you're in a multi-cloud environment and all this stuff, it's like any other program. The program is only as good as the data that you put into it. But the problem is most people aren't sure what data to put into it first. And they're guessing. And this is why, for example, a chief data officer is critical in most large organizations now, because they have to be able to architect all the data in the organization to be able to feed these AI programs. And this is where AWS, it's kind of nice to have, but at the same time, it's kind of like going to one of these little, maybe I'm dating myself, where they used to have these little art studios where you could go in and make your own ceramics.
They still have those places, the pottery places.
Oh, that's good to know. But you could go in there and get one of those, you could get one of those turny tables. But the problem is you still have to get the right clay. You still have to have the skills to make the clay in the right area, even though you have the turning tables. So AWS is giving everybody those little spinny tables, but they don't necessarily have the right clay. They don't know how to architect the programs to do it. It just makes it easier for people who know what they're doing to have a set of library programs to implement.
Yeah, I would agree with you in the sense that there's a handful of organizations like maybe a Reuters and Intuit that have the tech resources and have been early on this whole journey. But I'm betting that 95% of the companies out there are still trying to figure out, how do we make the actual AI agent, never mind actually give it data or anything else. They're just struggling with the little piece of code that they're going to use as the baseline.
So we live in an AI bubble. I'm sorry, John or Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I think are interesting here. Both of you guys are right, but the challenge is where are AI workloads going to get executed? And so who owns the agent, right, owns the workload, regardless of where the data is. And the challenge is it's inaccessible to a lot of folks, right? And here until now, there wasn't an SDK. There wasn't, sort of this reach into the browser. There wasn't some of the buildable tools. And then also the thing that everybody fights about is which service during what time of day gives you enough cores to return your AI workload at the speed you need it with the amount of tokens required to generate it. And so, doubling down on the amount of infrastructure they're willing to put behind it, I think is a statement. And I would argue, the rationale behind choosing between, using Gemini for this particular workload or, the Bedrock framework that allows you to get access to all of these other models, AWS says, hey, look, I have the highest percentage of the infrastructure in the cloud. I want everybody running their AI workloads here. But here until now, they haven't given us any tools aside from let me weaponize Bedrock specifically in order to make, the entire user flow easier for people that don't do this organically and aren't data scientists and platform wizards as well.
That's an interesting take, Fred. It's a discussion I had not on the gang, on a TechStrong TV interview I did yesterday or the other day. And that is, we are at a funny juncture in this AI journey right now. I think you're 100% correct. Initially, the people they were building this for, the people who were using it, the people who were pushing the envelope were very much, let's call them AI engineers, data scientists, these kinds of people that They were the initial audience, if you will. But now I think it's transitioning to, we want platform engineers, we want developers, we want security people, we want DevOps engineers, we want SREs, we want that sort of traditional IT stack from the developer on down to start using AI. And that means, well, we've got to change the interfaces, the use cases, the nomenclature, to make it fit their world, not the world of the data scientist or the AI geek. And it's going to take time, right? There's a transition that's going on right before our eyes. But you're right. He who controls, the platform that these agents are being built on and going forth is in the cat's bird seat. And the way I see it is, everybody and their mother recognizes that in the tech world, and they're all vying for it. And part of the problem with AI, we discussed it on yesterday's show, is, it's the ultimate billionaires club. Yeah. You got to have serious cash to be able to play in this. So, saying.
I think DevOps engineers should just rebrand themselves as AI DevOps engineers, get themselves a 30% raise, and who's to say they're not an expert, because nobody else knows what they're doing either. So
maybe.
Yeah. There was that interesting, I think part of the announcement with this new edition of Marketplace, kind of as a central hub for businesses to deploy and manage specialized AI agents. And again, you talk about the Billionaires Club. So there's AWS, and I think Microsoft has Agent Store, Google Cloud's AI Agent Marketplace. I mean, there's kind of parceling.
Well, there's Agent Force, right? They want it. Cisco's doing it. ServiceNow is doing it.
Again, but these are the biggest of the biggest companies.
Right. It's the billionaires clubs.
Well, yeah, I still think I'll use the example, and what people need to understand. To me, I like analogies. It's like a spreadsheet. Right now, the problem is that if you go to a spreadsheet, like most people do a spreadsheet to create a very, very simple table, because, and it's like you're paying a lot of money for something that could be done in a Word document, frankly, at the end of the day for most people. But if you happen to really, really know how to work a spreadsheet, you could work magic. You could run your company off of Microsoft Excel. Not that I'm saying you should, but you could, because the capability is there. The problem is, what AWS is doing sounds incredible at the moment for a variety of reasons. Much like Fred said, it's enabling a lot of what companies can do. The problem, though, is most companies don't have, to Fred's and everybody else's discussion, they don't have the expertise to take all these library of agents. They don't have the data. They don't have all this other thing to actually make it useful. They're, to Alan's point, it's like a billionaires club, where a few large companies will have the people. It will simplify their way of ramping up. But it's people who are few and far between who have the ability to staff it up. And like what we're talking about in a later segment today, you have to throw lots of smart people to make it useful at it with lots of money.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap this one up and take a break. But, we're creating AI have and have nots. Oh. And maybe that's what we're destined to,
I was going to say before you end this segment, we can maybe talk about it later in another segment, but Oxford University has been doing a lot of research into the haves and the have-nots, and it's a very small pool of the haves, and the vast majority of the rest of the world are the have-nots.
Oh, no doubt about it. But those haves will accelerate, right? Become super intelligent, maybe. That's what we're going to talk about next. Nice segue, John. You're watching TechStrong, gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey, folks, we're back and we're talking, as Al and John were talking about, superintelligence, which I'm not quite clear is any different than what we call, is it
AGI?
AGI.
It's
Yes.
artificial general intelligence. But there's a report now that Meta is out trying to train machines to think like humans by starting over and treating them like babies and trying to teach them from the very beginning everything you need to know to be a human. And of course, they have been spending mountains of money just trying to attract talent. John, I know you've been covering this space a little while, but it seems like, especially out in the Valley, everybody and his brother who can have AI on their resume is now worth $1 billion plus. But how real is superintelligence to you?
I think it is real. I mean, you alluded to, Mike, this teaching study. Well, what Meta's doing is their researchers are studying how babies learn. So one of the examples is a simple action like throwing a tennis ball into the air and predicting what it will do to require to catch it. And they're looking at things like the ability to form full sentences. There's a chief AI scientist at Meta who said they're building a world model akin to embedding an AI agent with common sense. But it kind of all goes back to, we talked about superintelligence and AGI, and they kind of blur together for me at times. But simply, Meta is trying to create this AI lab that would surpass human intelligence with superintelligence. So there's this research lab under development. This is the news where Meta had acquired essentially Scale AI CEO. They made an investment of about $15 billion in Scale AI, or 49% of the company. Zuckerberg is very heavily engaged in this, evidently, reportedly, spearheading this effort. And he's trying to put together this superintelligence group of 50 top AI researchers and engineers. And since he's not happy with Meta's AI efforts, and so he has kind of taken the lead in putting together this team in which they're offering these incredible pay packages, and they're trying to poach people from OpenAI with packages worth up to $100 million. And the idea is to move beyond AI research to a more specialized focus on AGI and ultimately superintelligence. And the idea is they're going to weave AGI, and let's just stick with AGI. They want to weave it across their product suite of chatbots, augmented reality glasses, and other projects that we don't know about. So in a sense, this is where they're going. And it all kind of ties in what we talked about yesterday with this incredible amount of money that these companies are spending. I think in the case on data centers, in the case of Meta, I think it's $60 to $65 billion they claim this year alone. It's going to be interesting to see this race and this concept of a superintelligence lab. It also shows Zuckerberg's ultimate frustration with Llama 4, and kind of trying to move forward and trying to gain some sort of competitive edge. But again, as Alan has said, and we all have agreed upon this the last couple of days, it's all about the companies with the resources sitting on piles of cash who are going to be able to do this and try to gain some sort of advantage over everyone else and then hook the rest of us in.
So, John, I'm so confused. You know, I just, before doing the gang today, I was texting with Daniel Newman from Futurum.
Yeah. Oh, yes. He's been very keen about this.
But we were talking from the way Daniel and I were talking, and the way Daniel's explaining it. Superintelligence is sort of a way station on the way to AGI. It sounds like you're saying superintelligence is beyond AGI.
Yes. That's based on what has been reported out of Meta. They consider it the next threshold or next level. But then again, they use these phrases so often interchangeably that I almost would prefer, just to simplify things, to just continue with the AGI reference. Superintelligence is probably new marketing spin or marketing branding of it. Maybe they've just decided that it has more sex appeal. But in a sense, the project within Meta is this superintelligence lab that they're working on.
Yeah. Well, the data center, they're building two of these data centers. One's in Ohio, and that's the big one. That's,
right.
I forgot.
Hyperion, which is
Prometheus. Prometheus is the one in Ohio.
Yeah, Louisiana.
Hyperion is in Louisiana. It's going to be bigger than Manhattan, Ira. Right? No, I'm not kidding. They said it's going to be bigger than Manhattan. One day, a data center complex.
Also, OpenAI is working on something in Texas that they claim is a data center that's going to be the size of Central Park.
Yeah, no, that's small potatoes. That's a
smaller than Manhattan.
But it's just, again, the scale. You think about it, it's like near.
But let's bring Lisa in here for a minute. It seems to me, Lisa, that the definition of AGI keeps changing, and it is becoming more of a marketing term, and the goalposts are shifting. And for what's supposed to be really just research and development, there sure is a lot of marketing spin here. What's going on from your perspective?
There is. I actually, great to see you guys. I agree with John that superintelligence is a sexier term, and folks are really wrapping their heads around it. I won't say people can wrap their heads around it, but I was just on stage at a big conference a couple months ago and interacting with a robot, talking about superintelligence and what it's going to be enabling everyone to do. From a marketing perspective, marketers I talk to every week, everyone's, and I've said this on this program before, heavily leaning into AI-powered marketing tools. What they're Gen AI, they're using it for content creation, for videos, et cetera. Now they're leaning into how to deploy AI agents. So that's where marketers are in really understanding, well, how can AI agents actually be on our org chart, help marketers leverage these tools to enhance campaigns, improve customer engagement? How can agents help marketers create more personalized, more engaging customer experiences? But I think from a terminology perspective, it is a little bit blurry. And I think I like John's point of superintelligence being it's kind of like a sexier.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Lisa, because in a weird way, think back to when Facebook or Meta, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, when they were throwing billions of dollars into the metaverse. Remember that? Remember that big push? A metaverse then became, and I went back and forth with Facebook about this. They renamed the company, and I said, so you basically squandered billions of dollars in this metaverse push. And they're like, no, you're wrong. It's not a metaverse. It's AI now. So it's like a moving goalpost.
Yeah.
They kind of redefine.
Well, they're just right. That's pure spin.
Yeah, actually.
Well,
but guys, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ira.
Well, could I just point out what this company is essentially doing I like to simplify things. This company is essentially training AI data right now, because this whole concept of superintelligence, again, I look at the fundamentals. Fundamentally, when you have artificial intelligence, using my Dr. Evil quotes, artificial intelligence requires models, it requires data, and it requires the tuning of these models with the data at hand. So when they're talking about, when I read the articles, it's like, oh, they're talking about a child, how a child slowly learns. No, what they're doing is they're talking about taking data, forcing it into their programs, and then figuring out how to tune and train their AI programs to anticipate the right data. Like you said, a ball being thrown up in the air. What they're really doing is they're saying, okay, here's the trajectory of a ball. A person watches the ball intuitively and figures out where it's going to land. What they're essentially doing is tuning their mathematical models to calculate where it's going to land. Now, to Alan's point again and again, this is a case where the haves are going to beat out the have-nots. And the reason that this is important is that Zuckerberg and everyone else are investing billions of dollars into pre-training these AI models so that they can better think. And the fact that they have these very well-trained AI models, possibly definitely years, if not decades ahead of everyone else, is going to make their models that much better in the future. And everybody's going to either have to license them or catch up. Now, I see Fred shaking his head. I don't know if he agrees or disagrees.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is the way that we talk about the storyboard of what the mission is in these particular cases. And so if you look at the mission for Anthropic, right, which is to have a steerable, interpretable AI, and you look at XAI as to understand the universe, what Meta wants to do basically is have an AI assistant for every person on the planet. They're very different sort of goals. And when you look at the overall outcomes, Ira 100%, if you look at each of those organizations, their mission's based off of the data they have, for sure. But the intention behind that is the question mark that I have, right? These labs are basically a supercomputing Cold War that's happening right now. And the characteristics of those things are how fast, which models, and then what's the value for the end user. I think the curious part there is going to be what happens after all of that data analysis has been run through, and what does the democratization look like?
So on yesterday's show, Guy Courier, our friend Guy Courier, said something I really made me think, and I thought about it a bunch yesterday and last night. You talk about their mission, Fred. Let me tell you what could be another mission here that is not said out loud. When you look at Zuck, and you look at Elon Musk, and you look at the, Larry and Sergey from Google and Sam Altman and all these AI tech bros, Peter Thiel, the whole bunch of them, this whole cabal of tech bros, multi-billionaire AI tech bros. Are they really doing this for the money? Are they doing it for the ego to say they were first? Or are they doing it for immortality? Are they looking to set up systems that they can download into and live forever? And it's going to take, that is the ultimate billionaires club, right?
Is there anybody who thinks that, training AI for intelligence based on humanity is kind of a fool's errand? Because I'm like,
no, because Facebook is trying to give it a human touch, because for them it's about robot. They're not looking to get developers developing more code or security people making better security. They're looking to do humanoid robots, very humanistic sort of interface. But make no mistake, that immortality is a thing.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right.
Agree.
They're motivated by all of the above, but especially the mortality angle.
Sure, everybody has to live forever, but they have the money to actually
They can do it. Yeah,
try to do it. And it's out of a Hollywood kind of script, right? Anyway, let's take a break. We're going to be back here on Tech Strong Gang. We've got one more. Poor Elmo. What happened to our little Elmo? You're watching Tech Strong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, folks, we're back, and poor Elmo. Nobody's safe these days. He got hacked and was made to say all kinds of mean and nasty things. But Lisa, let's jump to you right away. This feels to me like every marketer's nightmare. Is this going to become commonplace?
Yes. When you think about Elmo, he's lovable, he's furry, he's eternally 3.5 years old. The picture, the face of innocence in the cyberspace, he's been a force for good for Sesame Street since the 1900s. In recent years, he's become more cyber, obviously on X. But, what happened was really shocking many people. I think Elmo's got about 650,000 followers on X. And the Sesame Street workshop that runs it was absolutely shocked. The Anti-Defamation League was shocked. Elmo's account was hacked over the weekend. And it included a string of posts. They were racist. They were anti-Semitic messages criticizing the president, calling for the release of the Epstein files. I mean, it was really, really hot. And so now, while Sesame Street Workshop has addressed these, quote, disgusting anti-Semitic posts that were hacked, there's still screenshots out there. That's the challenge with things on the internet, is they can live forever. There's about 6 screenshots in total that are going around. Sesame Street says the account is now secure, but what it shows is no one is safe. They went to something that is probably the essence of innocence on the internet and hacked it. Now, that also kind of reminded me of some of the Grok troubling posts that we've seen just a couple weeks after XAI put a hold on the X account because Grok went crazy posting similar messages. It posted an apology, but still.
But Grok wasn't hacked. There's a difference.
That's true. That's a good point. No, Elmo was purely innocent and purely hacked.
Right.
And it just goes to show that parents need to know cyber and kids, what parents need to do. And it's some of the basic things like multi-factor authentication. I don't know the specifics of what happened with Elmo's account, but it just goes to show that nobody's safe.
Well, could I jump in as the only person who's probably been personally targeted by the New York, Washington, what was it? The Wall Street Journal. If you go ahead, there's zero new to this. In the first place, kids who follow Elmo shouldn't be on Twitter anyway. They, like 13 years old. This is like, oh my God, Elmo. I don't think Elmo's the icon of innocence. I mean, Elmo was manhandled by a sexual predator for a while. This is not shocking in any way, shape, or form. But let's look at what happened. We're talking about the takeover of Twitter accounts, which is not new at all. When you go back and search for all the listeners while you're listening, Google Ira Winkler, Syrian Electronic Army, and cockroach. And you will see that the Syrian Electronic Army targeted me personally. I was told by the FBI they hated me more than Obama, by the way. And they hacked the Wall Street Journal Twitter feeds to call me a cockroach. They hacked BuzzFeed's Twitter feeds to call me a cockroach. Accounts which are much larger. They hacked the Associated Press Twitter feed at one point in time, saying that there was an attack on the White House, which moved the stock market. So what we are talking about fundamentally are attacks against personal accounts, and even the DoD accounts were hacked in the past. So what we are talking about is an identity compromise because of a lack of multi-factor authentication, sharing of accounts, and a bunch of other stuff. How Elmo was hacked, it's probably the same thing. They guessed the password or fished the password more likely, and were able to go ahead and hack. But the bigger lesson is not poor Elmo. I mean, anybody on Twitter who's looking at Elmo, you're not looking at him for serious, motivational, good, warm, fuzzy feelings in general. If you ask me, it's kind of a joke account. But it's just a sign that there are much more critical accounts. I mean, Trump is using Twitter as public policy, which to me is horrifying. But at the same time, his account was hacked in the past. You had Biden's account hacked in the past. You had all these other people's accounts who were hacked. And we have to learn, yes, we need security, but we also need to learn, wait a second, what it goes on these accounts might not really be what is going on these accounts. And it requires public perception, public awareness that Twitter is not an authoritative source on that identity, even though you think it should be.
You mean if I don't pay Elon the money to get the check mark and everything, I thought if you did that, you are secure.
I can probably pay for a check mark and start an Alan Schimmel account for you if you want a check mark. And I'll be happy to tweet out.
I would disagree with Ira on one point. I think it might be helpful for adults to check in with Elmo every morning because, it just levels you out and maybe makes you a better person.
But let me ask you a question. So Elmo was a victim of abuse and manhandled. I thought it was Cookie Monster.
No, it was not.
It might have been the same one. That guy has
Elmo.
2 hands. Remember that.
No, I mean, look, this is, I filed this under why we can't have nice things, right? Whether you think Elmo should have an account and how much you believe in Elmo, Santa Claus, and the Tooth Fairy. The fact that, people will use these accounts to spout this kind of garbage, and like it or not, there are minors on the internet. They are on X, and they're going to see it. And, this is very nice people.
Hey, I guess that means you're not anybody till you get your account hacked. Is that?
I was hacked, Black Hat, 2005. Also anti-Semitic stuff, and it was pornography. It was all kinds of nonsense, and I had to get all my emails back. I know, Fred, you knew me then. You might probably remember.
Yeah.
What a pain in the ass that was. But anyway, it's not fun. It's not fun. And, I found out who hacked me, and he's in jail now, not for hacking me, but he deserves to be in jail.
Wow.
Anyway, poor Elmo, but look,
Shock and
Elmo, as Ira says, Elmo's really kind of the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah. Somebody better protect Big Bird. That's all I got to say.
And Grover. Let's not forget Grover.
Grover's awesome.
Poor Grover. All right.
I don't.
Guys,
There's more lessons from Oscar the Grouch, if you ask me.
Oscar was definitely a person. Guys, we gotta pull the plug on this great Friday. Lisa, thanks for joining in. I know you had some technical difficulties, and we appreciate you fighting through those. Rest of my gang members, enjoy the cool northwestern weather up in Seattle, out in the West Coast, or Lake Placid, or whatever you are. Mm-hmm. Of course, we're roasting here in South Florida, but we do have a full TechStrong TV lineup immediately following the gang today. Check that out. We'll be back Monday with lots more new good stuff. Enjoy the weekend. We're out.